Today's the day. The Prime Minister will be travelling to Washington in just a few hours, where he will find out if his multi-billion-pound increase to the UK's defence budget is enough to win over President Trump. He pledged to increase spending to 2.5% of GDP by 2027, which, of course, comes at a cost. That cost, a cut to the foreign aid budget from 0.5% to 0.3%.
Which amounts to about £6 billion. So is the Prime Minister right to cut foreign aid to boost defence? The former head of the British Army, Lord Richard Dannatt, says it's a tough decision, but it's the right one to make. His son, Tom Dannatt, is chief executive and founder of the charity Street Child, thinks it's just politically convenient and completely wrong. Well, this must make for interesting conversations around the dinner table when you two get together. Thanks very much indeed for having this argument on air for us. Tom, a lot of people getting in touch with us this morning think we have a bloated foreign aid budget. Of course it should be cut back if it's going to make our country safer. And as far as I know, you've already lost money because of the cut to the American aid budget. Is that right?
Yeah, Richard, Susanna, good morning. This is correct. About 10% of Street Child's budget for 2025 was coming from US aid, which has been cut already, which was immensely disappointing. Our Foreign Secretary called it short-sighted, and so it was a nasty surprise to be getting whispers yesterday morning that this increase in the defence budget was likely to be funded by a cut in British aid. The organisation I run, Street Child, works around the world to help children to be safe in school and learning. We work in places like Afghanistan, Liberia, Sierra Leone, and British Aid has been a very important partner for us. We would not be the organisation that we are. We've helped 1.5 million children to be safe in school and learning in the last 15 years. And small bits of money in the context of the UK change a child's life. It costs about £100 for us to take an out-of-school child, get them into school, and to support their family to keep that child in school. That will change the trajectory of that child's life, and en masse, that will change the trajectory of a society.
I'm sure nobody would argue with that. The problem surely is perception. You've got projects like yours, you've got starving children in Sudan being helped out by British foreign aid, but alongside them, you've got projects that drive people crackers, basically. For example, you've got a theatre company in Shanghai being funded. You've got a bike lane in Mexico City being funded by British taxpayers. And people go crackers when they hear about that. And that kind of pollutes the argument for much foreign aid, doesn't it?
Look, there's lots of bad areas of spend in any part of the public life. We could pull out bad stories from the British education budget, from the British health budget, from the British defence budget. I'm sure there's IT problems and bad procurement and all sorts. So it's a frankly ridiculous argument to make. I think it's very unfortunate that especially right-wing politicians have chosen to accentuate these stories rather than the immense good that British aid has done, especially the last 20 years where Britain's been a real leader. Well, not the last 5 years, because we've had a series of cuts in changing societies. And I think organisations like Street Child need to do a better job, not just at delivering British aid, but actually telling the story of the way they're changing lives and actually making the world a safer place as well.
Let's speak to a former head of the British Army, your dad, Lord Richard Dannatt. Thank you very much indeed as well for joining us. So your son says, Tom says, actually these projects make the world a safer place because they change the course of society. We want a safer world, don't we? So what's the argument for stealing from aid to pay for defence?
Well, Susanna, good morning. I think the government has been right that it's eventually listened to the commentary and analysis that against the difficult security situation in the world, and especially an ongoing war in Ukraine and threatened further aggression by Russia, that decision has been taken to increase UK defence spending, going up from 2.3 to 2.5 with the thought that it might well go to 3% at some point in the next parliament. Now, that is to be welcomed. Now, to govern is to choose and to set priorities, and the government has had to decide in fairly short order, because I think actually the Prime Minister and the Chancellor were resisting calls for increased defence spending until very recently. They've had to choose where to get the money from. And they have gone for what I would call a soft touch. They're taking money out of our soft power. And if you look back in history, Britain has gained influence in the world by a combination of our soft power and our hard power together. Defence, diplomacy, development have gone on an integrated basis and been successful. So I think, on the one hand, while I welcome the additional money that's going into defence, I lament the soft decision that the government has taken, and it could have gone elsewhere. And frankly, when it grows to 3% of GDP and maybe beyond, it'll have to go elsewhere. It'll have to consider raising taxes. It'll have to break the fiscal rules. That I think it's a real shame. And I'll just put it in the wider context, and Tom, I think, has alluded to this. Not many years ago, our aid budget, our development budget, was 0.7% of GDP. The last government took it down to 0.5. And now, my goodness, they're taking it down to 0.3. So on the one hand, I'm pleased we've got extra money for defence, but I'm not pleased that actually it's eroding Britain's overall influence in the world, which comes as a combination of defence, diplomacy and development.
Do you feel that to some extent Sir Keir Starmer yesterday was playing to two galleries? He was playing to the public gallery here. I have to say most of our viewers who've contacted this morning are in support of what he's done and where he's getting the money from foreign aid. And also to Trump, not just by increasing defence spending, but by taking it from foreign aid, because we know that Trump is very cynical about foreign aid. So was it a very political decision, do you think?
Well, it's political, it's timely. Frankly, if I was Keir Starmer going to see the President of the United States tomorrow with all his stated positions, knowing that I had to increase defence spending, I would find a way of doing it and announcing it before I got to the White House. And that's what Keir Starmer has done. But while, as I said, on the one hand, I applaud the additional increase to defence budget. Frankly, the cost to Street Child, the cost to what Tom is doing, the cost to other charities is huge. And I certainly hope that viewers who have got deep pockets will consider putting their hand in their pocket and contributing to charities like Street Child to help make up the deficit, because it's really important that, you know, children such as Street Child help to get into school and to families are properly looked after. And it's a tragedy if that work has to be cut back, even though I support as a matter of high priority increasing spending on defence.
Lord Dannatt, are we on a war footing now?
We're having to put ourselves on a war footing, and it's absolutely right. We are a European country, and another country in Europe was attacked totally illegally and outrageously 3 years ago. We have been at war for quite some time. Look at the undersea cable interference that's going on. Look at other hybrid activities, cyber attacks. The Russians have been putting pressure on countries like ours, not to mention the poisoning in Salisbury 7 years ago, for quite some time. The hard fighting is going on in Ukraine. What we absolutely don't want to get ourselves into is a situation where we all have to get into hard, bloody fighting as well. Right. And the way to avoid that is spending enough on defence to deter further aggression from Putin. But don't let's ruin the development sector.
There we have to end it, I'm afraid. We could talk about this much longer, but I'm afraid we're out of time. Father and son, thank you both very much indeed for joining us.